The sound of her palm hitting my face echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. My knees hit the marble floor of the Grand Meridian Hotel, and 300 wedding guests gasped in unison. The champagne flute I'd been holding shattered somewhere to my left. I could hear the tinkling glass, could feel the warm liquid soaking through my pants, but all I could really focus on was the burning handprint on my cheek and the woman standing over me. Jessica, my daughter-in-law, wearing a dress that cost more than most people's cars. "Go work, you old parasite!" she screamed, her face twisted with rage that seemed disproportionate to what I'd just said. Or maybe not. Maybe she'd been waiting years to say it. I stayed down, one hand pressed against the cold marble, the other touching my jaw to see if anything was broken. Around us, the party had frozen. The string quartet had stopped mid-note. Waiters stood with trays suspended in mid-air. My son David stood 5 feet away, looking at his shoes like they were the most fascinating things in the world. Not at me, not at his wife, at his shoes. That's when I knew. I pushed myself up slowly, ignoring the hands that reached out to help. I was 67 years old, but I'd been working with my hands my whole life, and I wasn't so decrepit that I needed assistance standing. "You okay, sir?" A young waiter, couldn't have been more than 20, looked genuinely concerned. "Fine," I said. My voice came out steady. Good. I'd need that steadiness in the days ahead. Jessica was still standing there, chest heaving, looking like she expected applause. Her mother was whispering frantically in her ear, probably telling her to apologize, to smooth it over. But Jessica wasn't the smoothing over type. She was the burn it down type. I'd known that for years, but I'd kept my mouth shut because that's what you do when you're trying to keep peace in a family. But peace was over now. "All I asked," I said quietly, and the room leaned in to hear, "was to borrow $50 until Monday." "You asked at my wedding," Jessica shrieked, "in front of everyone. You tried to humiliate me." I hadn't. I'd asked quietly, at the bar, when she came over to get a drink. But she'd made it public. She'd wanted this scene. Maybe not consciously, but some part of her had been itching for it. "I apologize," I said, and I meant it. I was sorry. Sorry I'd tested them, and they'd failed so spectacularly. "I'll leave." "Dad, wait." David finally found his voice, but I was already walking. My car was parked in the hotel garage 3 levels down. My phone was in my pocket. And in my phone was the number of a lawyer who owed me a favor. A big one. Margaret, my wife, had died 8 months ago. Cancer, the kind that moves fast and doesn't give you time to prepare. She'd been the glue holding this family together, the one who made excuses for David's selfishness, who smiled through Jessica's casual cruelty. She'd loved them despite everything, because that's what mothers do. But I wasn't a mother, and I'd stopped being a father the moment my son watched his wife knock me to the ground and said nothing. The inheritance sat in accounts that only I could access. $8 million, accumulated over 40 years of careful investing, selling the business at the right time, making smart real estate plays. Margaret and I had lived modestly, saved aggressively, planned for a comfortable retirement. She got 6 months of it before the diagnosis. David and Jessica thought we were broke. I'd let them think it. When Margaret died, I'd told them her medical bills had eaten through our savings, that the house was mortgaged to the hilt, that I was barely scraping by on Social Security. They'd believed it because they'd wanted to. It made their lives easier, not having to pretend they cared. I drove home in silence, my jaw throbbing, my mind racing. The apartment I lived in was in a building I owned, but they didn't know that either. They thought I rented a 1-bedroom in a decent neighborhood, that I was hanging on by my fingernails. Let them keep thinking it. For now. I unlocked the door and went straight to my desk. The file was where I'd left it, thick with documents, account statements, property deeds, Everything organized the way Margaret and I had organized our lives, methodically, carefully, with attention to detail. I opened my laptop and pulled up my email. The lawyer's name was Richard Pine, and he'd worked with me when I sold my consulting firm 15 years ago. He was expensive, discreet, and completely uninterested in moral judgments. Perfect. Richard, I wrote, I need to see you Monday morning, first thing, regarding the matter we discussed last year. It's time. I hit send and leaned back in my chair. My phone buzzed, text messages flooding in. David. Dad, I'm sorry, Jessica was stressed. David. It's been a crazy day. David. She didn't mean it. David. Can we talk tomorrow? I deleted them without responding. Another text, this one from Jessica's mother. Henry, I'm so sorry about what happened. Jessica feels terrible. I doubted that very much. I got up and walked to the kitchen, poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey, the good stuff, the bottle Margaret and I had been saving for a special occasion. This felt special enough. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. For 43 years there'd been someone else here. First Margaret, then after David moved out, just the two of us, comfortable in our routines. She'd sit on the couch with her crossword puzzles, I'd read my engineering journals, and we'd exist in the kind of peaceful silence that only comes after decades together. Now there was just silence, no peace in it. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the photos, found the one I was looking for, Margaret and me on our 40th anniversary, standing in front of the cabin we'd rented in Vermont. She was laughing at something I'd said, her head thrown back, her hand on my arm. God, she'd been beautiful. I'm sorry, I said to her picture. I know you wouldn't want this, but they don't get to disrespect you by disrespecting me. She didn't answer, of course. I finished the whiskey and went to bed. Sleep came surprisingly easily, maybe because for the first time in 8 months, I had a purpose. Before we continue, we ask you to subscribe and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We would like to get to know our audience better. Richard Pine's office occupied the top floor of a building downtown, with views of the city that probably cost more per square foot than most people's homes. I arrived at 8:30 Monday morning, wearing my good suit, the one I'd worn to Margaret's funeral. Henry. Richard stood and shook my hand. He was in his 50s, silver-haired, with the kind of tan that comes from golf courses and Caribbean vacations. I was hoping you'd reach out eventually. Coffee? Please. He poured from a French press, handed me a cup. I assume this is about your son. And his wife. Tell me what happened. I told him. The wedding, the request for $50, the slap, David's silence. Richard listened without interrupting, his expression neutral. When I finished, he said, You tested them. I did, and they failed. Spectacularly. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. What do you want, Henry? Revenge? Justice? Those aren't always the same thing. I want them to understand what they threw away. I want them to feel what I felt on that ballroom floor, and I want it done legally, cleanly, in a way they can't undo. The property on Maple Street, the one in David's name. My name too, joint ownership, right of survivorship. Correct, which means you can sell your half without his consent. And if I sell to the right buyer, someone willing to pay cash and close quickly, your son would find himself with a very unpleasant new partner, or no house at all, if the buyer wanted to force a partition sale. I sipped my coffee. It was excellent. There's more. Jessica works at Hartman & Associates, marketing director. I know Hartman, good firm. Her position exists because of a recommendation I made 6 years ago. James Hartman and I go way back. I consulted on their office building project. I've never called in that favor. Richard raised an eyebrow. Until now. I want information. Performance reviews, any complaints, anything that might justify reconsidering her employment. That's walking a fine line, Henry. I'm not asking you to get her fired. I'm asking you to tell James Hartman that his marketing director just publicly assaulted her father-in-law at a society wedding in front of 300 witnesses. I'm asking you to let him know that I'd consider it a personal favor if he looked into whether she's the kind of person he wants representing his firm. And if he decides she isn't? Then that's his decision, based on facts. Richard set down his cup. You've thought this through. I've had 8 months to think, ever since Margaret died and I saw how they really felt. They came to the funeral? They came. David gave a eulogy he clearly wrote in the car on the way over. Jessica checked her phone during the service. They left before the reception ended because they had dinner reservations. I'm sorry. Don't be. It clarified things. Richard pulled out a legal pad and started writing. The Maple Street property. I'll have my real estate attorney reach out to a few investment firms, see who's interested in a quick purchase. Cash buyers who won't ask questions. You'll take a bit of a loss, selling your half at market rate without David's cooperation, but I don't care about the money. Right. And Hartman? Call him today. Be tactful, but be clear. Anything else? I hesitated. This next part was trickier. David's company, the startup he's been running for 3 years. The tech thing, the app, it's bleeding money, has been from the start. He's staying afloat because of angel investors who like his pitch. But I've seen the financials. Margaret was on his board, and before she died, she made sure I had access. The company's going to fail. It's just a matter of when. And you want to accelerate that timeline. I want to make sure his investors know what they're funding. I want them to have accurate information about burn rate, user acquisition costs, the real numbers, not the fantasy numbers David presents. Richard was quiet for a moment. That's playing with fire, Henry. If David finds out you're the source, he won't. The information will come from someone with legitimate access to the company records. Someone with a fiduciary duty to report concerns. You're still on the board. Margaret left me her seat. David hasn't removed me yet, probably forgot I exist in any official capacity. Board members have legal protections when they raise concerns in good faith. Exactly. Richard wrote for another minute, then looked up. This is comprehensive, strategic. Most people come in here looking for emotional satisfaction. They want to yell, to threaten, to make noise. You're building something systematic. Margaret taught me that. She was an accountant. Everything had to balance. She'd approve of this? I thought about that. No, she'd hate it. But she's not here, and I am, and they need to learn that actions have consequences. When do you want to start? Today. As soon as possible. Richard stood and extended his hand again. I'll make the calls. Expect updates by end of business. This is going to get ugly, Henry. Are you prepared for that? I fell on a marble floor while 300 people watched, and my son did nothing. It's already ugly. I'm just spreading it around. I left his office feeling lighter than I had in months. The morning air was crisp, the city was waking up, and I had work to do. My phone rang as I walked to my car. David. I let it go to voicemail. He called 3 more times before I got home. I deleted the voicemails without listening. The call from Richard came at 4:30 that afternoon. It's done, he said. Hartman wants to see Jessica in his office tomorrow at 9. Let's say he was very receptive to the information about her behavior. And the house? I found a buyer. Development company looking to flip properties in that neighborhood. They're offering 60% of market value for your half, cash, closing in 7 days. They're also very interested in forcing David to either buy them out at full market rate or accept a partition sale. 60% was a hit, but I didn't care. The house was worth about $800,000. My half was $400,000, so I'd get $240,000. David would either have to come up with $400,000 to buy out the investment company or watch his house get sold out from under him. Given that his startup was failing and Jessica was about to lose her job, I knew which way that would go. Take the deal, I said. Already did. Papers are being drawn up. You'll need to sign tomorrow. The board meeting? I spoke to 2 other board members. Quiet conversations. Expressed concerns about financial irregularities. Asked if they'd noticed anything odd. Planted seeds. That's all? That's enough. By next week's meeting, there will be questions. David will have to answer them, and his answers won't hold up to scrutiny. I thanked him and hung up. My apartment felt different now, still quiet, but not empty. Purpose filled the space where Margaret used to be. Not a replacement, nothing could replace her, but something to occupy my mind, to give my days structure. I made dinner, pasta, the way Margaret used to make it, with too much garlic and not enough salt. I ate at the kitchen table, reading the news on my tablet, just like always. Normal. Everything had to look normal. David called again at 6. I declined. At 7, my doorbell rang. I considered not answering, but curiosity got the better of me. I checked the peephole. David stood in the hallway, looking tired. Behind him, Jessica, looking furious. I opened the door but didn't step aside. Yes? Dad, we need to talk. David's voice was strained. Can we come in? No. Jessica's eyes widened. Excuse me? You're not welcome in my home. Either of you. Dad, please. I'm not your dad anymore, David. A father is someone who protects his children. But it's supposed to work both ways. Children are supposed to protect their parents, too. You didn't. So we're done. Because of a misunderstanding? Jessica's voice rose. Because I got stressed at my own wedding? You hit me, in public. And you... I looked at David. You did nothing. I was in shock. For how long? 5 seconds? 10? How long does shock last before it becomes acceptance? Before it becomes complicity? David's face flushed. I came here to apologize. No, you didn't. You came because something happened today. Something that worried you. And you're wondering if I had anything to do with it. Jessica's expression confirmed my guess. James Hartman called me into his office. Started asking questions about my conduct outside work. About my judgment and professionalism. Where did he hear about the wedding? Probably from one of the 300 people who were there. News travels fast. Did you call him? Why would I? I don't even know the man. The lie came easily. Margaret would have been ashamed. Good thing she wasn't here. This is insane, Jessica said. You're acting like I committed a crime. It was a slap. You'll get over it. Yes, I agreed. I will. But you won't. I started to close the door. David put his hand on it, stopping me. Dad, please. I know I messed up. Let me make it right. How? You want to turn back time? You want to go back to Saturday night and actually defend me? Actually tell your wife that hitting elderly people is wrong? You're not elderly. I'm 67 years old, David. I'm a senior citizen. Which means what your wife did is actually classified as elder abuse in this state. Did you know that? It's a criminal offense. Jessica went pale. You wouldn't. File charges? No. I wouldn't give you the satisfaction of playing the victim. But that doesn't mean there aren't consequences. What consequences? David asked. What are you doing? Living my life. Organizing my affairs. Making sure I'm secure in my old age. Since I clearly can't count on family. I pulled the door closed. This time, David let me. Through the wood, I heard Jessica hiss, "This is your fault. You and your pathetic father." Their voices faded as they walked away. I went back to my pasta, but I'd lost my appetite. Instead, I poured another whiskey and sat in Margaret's chair, looking at her empty crossword puzzle book on the side table. They don't get it yet, I told her, but they will. Jessica was fired on Thursday. I heard about it from Richard, who heard about it from James Hartman himself. Apparently, Jessica had made the mistake of trying to defend herself by claiming that family matters shouldn't affect her employment. Hartman disagreed. He told her that assault was assault, family or not, and he couldn't have someone representing his firm who lacked basic decency and self-control. She'd threatened to sue for wrongful termination. Hartman had calmly pointed out that Colorado was an at-will employment state, and he needed no reason to fire her. But if she wanted to pursue legal action, he'd be happy to submit the wedding video that was currently circulating on social media as evidence of her character. There was a video. Of course there was. 300 guests, probably 100 phones. The footage showed everything. Me asking quietly for a loan, Jessica's explosive reaction, the slap, my fall, David's inaction. It had been viewed 40,000 times in 5 days. Jessica left Hartman's office without another word. David called me 6 times that day. I didn't answer. The development company papers arrived Friday morning. I signed them at Richard's office, and by Friday afternoon, the deal was done. I'd sold my half of David's house to Redstone Investments for $240,000 cash. David would find out Monday, when Redstone's lawyer contacted him about buying them out or accepting a partition sale. They'll try to buy, Richard predicted, but they won't be able to get financing, not with David's credit and Jessica unemployed. How long until the house sells? 3 months, maybe 4. Redstone will push for fast closing. David will scramble, take out loans, maybe try to find investors. But in the end, he shrugged, he'll lose the house. Good. Richard gave me a look. You're really going through with all of this? Yes. Henry, I have to ask, is this about justice or revenge? Does it matter? Legally? No. Morally? Maybe. I thought about that. It's about education. They need to learn that you can't treat people like garbage without consequences. Consider this their tuition. Expensive lesson. The best ones usually are. I drove home through downtown, past the restaurant where Margaret and I used to have dinner every Friday night. The reservations were under her name. I'd kept them for 3 months after she died, kept going alone, until the waiter got uncomfortable and the hostess started looking at me with pity. I'd stopped going then. Pity was worse than grief. My phone rang as I pulled into my building's garage. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mr. Sullivan? A woman's voice, professional. This is Detective Sarah Chen with the Denver Police Department. I'm calling about an incident that occurred on Saturday, October 11th at the Grand Meridian Hotel, a wedding reception. Are you familiar with this incident? My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I am. Sir? We've received a complaint about an assault. The video has been brought to our attention. I'd like to ask you some questions, if you have time. Did Jessica file a complaint against herself? A pause. No, sir. Someone else filed it. A witness. They claim they saw you being struck by a woman later identified as Jessica Sullivan, your daughter-in-law. They were concerned about elder abuse. I closed my eyes. I hadn't done this. I'd specifically decided not to do this, which meant someone else had. Some stranger at the wedding, someone with a conscience or too much free time. Mr. Sullivan, are you there? I'm here. Detective, I appreciate the concern, but I don't wish to press charges. It was a family matter, a misunderstanding. Sir, in cases of potential elder abuse, the state can prosecute even without the victim's cooperation. I'm not saying that's what will happen here, but I need to gather information. Would you be willing to come to the station and give a statement? No. Sir. I said no. I'm not interested in pursuing this. I'm fine. No lasting injury. I want to move on with my life. I understand. But Mr. Sullivan, I have to tell you, this video is concerning. The force of the blow, your age, the public nature of the assault. These are all factors that the district attorney's office will consider. You may not have a choice about whether charges are filed. Then that's their decision, not mine. I'm done with this conversation, Detective. Have a good day. I hung up before she could respond. This was a complication I hadn't planned for. If the state pressed charges, if this became a criminal case, everything would spiral beyond my control. The systematic, strategic approach I'd built would turn into chaos. Unless... I called Richard. The police contacted me, I said. About the slap. Someone filed a complaint. Hell, did you give a statement? No, refused. But the detective said the state might prosecute anyway. They might. It's a strong video. But Henry, if you don't cooperate, their case gets harder. They'd need other witnesses willing to testify, medical records showing injury, evidence of a pattern. Without you, they're fighting uphill. What do I do? Nothing. If they call again, politely decline. Don't give them anything. Eventually they'll drop it. They have bigger cases to worry about. And if they don't, then Jessica gets arrested, arraigned, maybe does community service or anger management classes. It won't be prison time for a first offense, but it will be public, very public, which, between you and me, serves your purposes pretty well. He was right. I hadn't pulled this trigger, but if the gun went off anyway, I wasn't going to step in front of the bullet. Okay, I said. I'll stonewall. Smart. Anything else? The board meeting's Monday? 10 a.m. Your fellow board members are primed. They'll ask David about the financials. He'll stumble. And once he stumbles, the investors will start asking their own questions. Perfect. I went upstairs and made dinner again. Chicken this time, with vegetables Margaret used to buy from the farmer's market. I ate mechanically, tasting nothing, thinking through scenarios. The police were a wild card, but manageable. The house sale would devastate them financially. Jessica's firing had already damaged their social standing. 3 dominoes down, 1 to go. My phone buzzed, a text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Emily Garrett. I was at the wedding. I'm the one who filed the police report. I'm sorry if this causes problems, but what I saw was unacceptable. No one should treat their family that way. I hope you're okay. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "Thank you for your concern. I'm fine." She responded immediately, "Good. And for what it's worth, your son should be ashamed of himself." I didn't reply to that. What was there to say? He should be. But shame required self-awareness, and David had demonstrated precious little of that lately. I finished dinner, washed the dishes, and sat down at my desk to review the documents Richard had sent over. Property deeds, corporate filings, financial statements, everything I needed to understand exactly what David and Jessica were about to lose. It was more than I'd realized. The house was just the beginning. David had taken out a second mortgage last year to fund the startup. Jessica's salary had been covering most of their living expenses. Without it, without the house, with the company failing, they'd be bankrupt within 6 months. I should have felt something. Guilt, maybe. Regret. Some kind of paternal instinct kicking in, telling me to stop, to pull back, to remember that this was my son. But I didn't. I felt nothing except a cold satisfaction that the math was working out exactly as planned. Margaret's voice in my head. "You're better than this, Henry." Maybe. But better didn't keep you warm at night when your family abandoned you. Better didn't protect you when your daughter-in-law's hand cracked across your face. Better was for people who could afford it. Monday morning, I arrived at David's office building at 9:30. The startup occupied the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse, exposed brick, industrial lighting, rows of desks where young people typed furiously and drank cold brew coffee. I'd been here once before, when Margaret was still on the board. She'd dragged me along to a meeting, wanting my opinion on some technical issue. David had barely acknowledged me then. Just a quick nod, a "Hey, Dad," before turning back to his pitch deck. The receptionist looked up as I entered. "Can I help you?" "Board meeting, 10 o'clock. "Name?" "Henry Sullivan." She checked her tablet, frowned. "I don't see you on the list." "I have Margaret Sullivan's board seat. She was my wife. She passed away last year and her position transferred to me." "Oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. Let me just—" She typed rapidly. "Okay, yes, I see it now. 3rd floor conference room. Would you like coffee?" "No, thank you." I took the stairs. My knee ached. old injury from my construction days, but I ignored it. Pain was just information. It told you something was wrong, but it didn't stop you from functioning. The conference room was glass-walled, with a long table and leather chairs. 4 people were already there: David, 2 investors I recognized from Margaret's notes, and a woman I didn't know. David looked up when I entered. His face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, concern, anger, resignation. "Dad, I didn't know you were coming. I'm on the board, it's a board meeting. Where else would I be?" "I just meant, we haven't talked in a week." "No, we haven't." I took a seat at the far end of the table. The investors watched this exchange with interest. The woman, 40-something, expensive suit, sharp eyes, extended her hand. "Angela Morrison, I joined the board in August. You're Margaret's husband?" "Yes." She was brilliant. Her loss was devastating. "Thank you." David cleared his throat. "Should we start? I know everyone's busy." The meeting began with the usual formalities: approval of previous minutes, review of action items. Then they got to financials. One of the investors, Thomas, pulled up a spreadsheet on the screen at the front of the room. "David, I'm looking at last quarter's numbers. Burn rate is up 30%, but user acquisition is only up 5%. Can you explain the discrepancy?" David launched into an explanation about marketing spend, about seasonal variations, about long-term strategy. It sounded good. It sounded like someone who knew what he was talking about. But Thomas wasn't satisfied. "These marketing numbers, I'm seeing costs here that don't match the invoices you sent last month. Where's the extra $60,000 going?" "Administrative overhead, legal fees, standard operating expenses." "That's not what you told us in September. You said overhead was fixed at 12% of revenue. These numbers show it at 31%. David's face flushed. "I'd need to check with our accountant." "I did check," Angela Morrison said quietly. "With your accountant. She says you reclassified several expense categories in August without board approval. She also says you've been using company funds to cover personal expenses, company credit card charges at restaurants, at luxury retailers, personal travel booked through the corporate account." The room went silent. David looked at Angela, then at Thomas, then at me. "Dad, did I what? Point out that you're stealing from your own company?" "No, I didn't have to. You made it obvious enough that people noticed on their own." "I'm not stealing. Those are legitimate business expenses. A $5,000 dinner at Le Cirque?" Angela pulled up another spreadsheet. "Business meals are tax-deductible, David, but they have to be actual business meals, not anniversary dinners with your wife. How do you—" "Your accountant keeps excellent records, including the notation, personal anniversary dinner in the expense notes. You paid yourself back using company funds." Thomas stood up. "This is unacceptable. We've invested $2 million in this company based on representations you made about fiscal responsibility and growth potential. Instead, we're finding out you've been treating the corporate account as your personal piggy bank." "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" The third investor, a woman named Patricia, spoke for the first time. "Because from where I'm sitting, this looks like fraud." David's face had gone from flushed to pale. "I can explain everything. Let me just—" "No." Angela's voice was firm. "We're suspending operations pending a full audit. As of today, you're on administrative leave. The CFO will handle day-to-day operations, and if this audit shows what I think it's going to show, we'll be discussing criminal charges. You can't do this. I founded this company with our money, which means we have rights. Read your shareholder agreement, David, specifically the section about fiduciary duties and grounds for removal." David looked at me again. This time his expression was pure hatred. "You did this. You set this up." "I didn't do anything except show up to a meeting I was legally entitled to attend. If your business practices can't stand up to basic scrutiny, that's your failure, not mine. This is because of the wedding. Because Jessica..." This is because you're a thief. You stole from your investors, from people who trusted you, just like you stole from me and your mother every time you asked for money while we were struggling to pay medical bills. Except we weren't struggling. We were fine. But you didn't bother to check. You just assumed we'd give you whatever you wanted. I stood up. I'm calling for a vote. David Sullivan should be removed as CEO, effective immediately, pending the results of a financial audit. All in favor? 4 hands went up. Mine, Angela's, Thomas's, Patricia's. Motion carries. I looked at David. Clean out your desk. Security will escort you out. You can't. I just did. I walked out of the conference room. Behind me, I heard David shouting, heard someone, probably Thomas, telling him to calm down or they'd call the police. I took the stairs down, my knees screaming with each step, but I didn't care. I'd just watched my son's life implode. I'd engineered it, piece by piece, domino by domino. And I felt nothing. No guilt, no regret. Just cold satisfaction that the equation had balanced. My phone rang as I reached the ground floor. Richard. The police called. They're dropping the case. Insufficient evidence without your cooperation. Good. And Jessica's trying to file for unemployment. Hartman's fighting it, claiming misconduct. It's going to get nasty. Let it. Henry, are you okay? You sound... I'm fine. Better than fine. Is that all? One more thing. David's mortgage company called his loan. Apparently, news of his termination spread fast. They want full payment in 30 days, or they're foreclosing. They can do that? There's a clause about material change in financial circumstances. Losing your job qualifies. So the house is gone. The house is gone. I hung up and walked to my car. The sun was out, the sky was blue, and somewhere in the building behind me, my son was probably crying or screaming or planning his revenge. I didn't care. I drove home, made lunch, and sat down at my desk to review my finances. The $240,000 from the house sale was safely deposited. The $8 million from Margaret's estate was untouched, invested conservatively, generating enough passive income that I could live comfortably for the rest of my life. I could travel. I could buy a nicer apartment. I could do 1,000 things Margaret and I had planned to do together. Instead, I sat in her chair and looked at her crossword puzzle book and felt nothing. 3 months later, David and Jessica's house sold at auction. Redstone Investments got their money back plus a tidy profit. David and Jessica got nothing. They moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a bad neighborhood. Jessica was still unemployed. David was working at a consulting firm, making a quarter of what he used to earn. They'd declared bankruptcy. Their credit was destroyed. I knew all this because Richard kept me informed. He seemed to think I needed updates, that I was somehow invested in their ongoing suffering. I wasn't. I just wanted confirmation that the math had worked. It was early January when I decided to do the final thing, the last move, the one that would close the book permanently. I'd been thinking about it for weeks, ever since Christmas passed and neither David nor Jessica had called. Not that I expected them to. We hadn't spoken since the board meeting. But some small part of me, the part that Margaret would have listened to, wondered if they'd reach out, if they'd apologize, if they'd finally understand what they'd done. They didn't. So I made my decision. I called Richard on a Tuesday morning. I want to make a donation. What kind of donation? The crisis center, the one that helps families in financial distress. Margaret volunteered there before she got sick. Okay. How much? $2 million. Silence on the other end. Then, that's substantial. I want it announced. Press release, ceremony, the whole thing. I want my name on it. The Margaret Sullivan Memorial Fund. To help families who've lost everything through no fault of their own. Henry, if you do this publicly, David will know. He'll know you had money all along. That's the point. It will destroy him. Good. Richard sighed. When do you want to do this? Next week. Set it up. He did. The crisis center was thrilled. $2 million was the largest donation they'd ever received. They scheduled a ceremony for the following Monday, invited the mayor, contacted the media. I spent the weekend preparing. I bought a new suit, got a haircut, practiced what I'd say. Margaret's photo would be displayed. Her name would be on the fund. People would remember her for her generosity, her compassion. They wouldn't know that I was doing this to hurt our son. Monday morning arrived clear and cold. I drove to the crisis center, arrived early, watched as they set up the podium and the banner. The Margaret Sullivan Memorial Fund. $2 million to help families in crisis. The irony wasn't lost on me. My own son was in crisis. My own family was in financial distress. And I was giving away enough money to save them 100 times over. But I wasn't going to, because they'd never asked. They'd never apologized. They'd never acknowledged that what they'd done was wrong. The ceremony started at 11. The executive director spoke first, talking about Margaret's volunteer work, her kindness, her dedication to helping others. Then the mayor said a few words about community and generosity. Then it was my turn. I walked to the podium and looked out at the crowd. 50 people, maybe 60, donors, volunteers, media, and in the back, barely visible, David. He'd come. He'd somehow heard about it and come. Our eyes met across the room. His face was haggard, thin. He'd lost weight. His suit was cheap, ill-fitting. He looked like someone who'd been broken and hadn't quite figured out how to put himself back together. I felt nothing. My wife Margaret, I began, believed that everyone deserved a second chance. She believed that financial hardship didn't define a person's worth. She believed in helping others, even when it cost her something. I paused, looked directly at David. I'm not as generous as she was. I believe actions have consequences. I believe that people who hurt others should face those consequences. But I also believe in honoring the memory of someone who was better than I am. I laid out the details of the donation. $2 million, immediately available, to be distributed to families in genuine need. Families who'd lost jobs, lost homes, lost hope through circumstances beyond their control. This fund is for people who deserve help, I said. For people who've been responsible, who've worked hard, who've treated others with respect and dignity. For people who, when life knocked them down, didn't blame others, didn't lash out, didn't hurt the people who loved them. The crowd applauded. The cameras flashed. The executive director shook my hand. And in the back, David turned and walked out. After the ceremony, I stayed for the reception. People wanted to thank me, to tell me stories about Margaret, to express their gratitude. I smiled and nodded and said the right things. At one point, the executive director pulled me aside. Your son was here. He left before I could speak with him. Do you want me to reach out? No. Oh, I just thought, well, this is such a generous gift. Surely your family must be proud. I don't have a family anymore. Just Margaret's memory. She looked uncomfortable, but didn't press. I left at 2, drove home, and found David sitting on the steps outside my building. He stood when he saw me. We need to talk. No, we don't. Dad, please, just 5 minutes. I unlocked the building door. He followed me inside, up the stairs, to my apartment. I didn't invite him in, but he came anyway. You had money, he said flatly. All along, the whole time Mom was sick, when you said you were broke, when you let us think you were struggling, you had millions. 8 million. The house I sold you half of, I owned it outright. This building, I own it. Have for 15 years. The inheritance Mom left, I never told you the real amount. His face cycled through emotions. Shock, anger, betrayal, understanding. Why? Because I wanted to see who you really were, without the promise of money, without the expectation of inheritance. I wanted to see if you cared about me, or just about what I could give you. So it was a test. Yes, and you failed. Jessica was stressed. Stop. Stop making excuses. She hit me, in public, and you did nothing. You stood there and let it happen. That's not stress. That's character. David sat down heavily on my couch. I know I messed up. But Dad, I've lost everything. My company, my house, my marriage. Your marriage? Jessica left me last week, said she didn't sign up to be poor. She's filing for divorce. I should have felt something. Sympathy, maybe. My son was sitting in front of me, broken, and I should have wanted to help. But I didn't. You made your choices, David. You chose a woman who valued money over character. You chose to treat me like an ATM instead of a father. You chose to stand silent when I needed you. These are consequences, not punishments. Consequences. So what? You're just going to let me suffer? You're going to give away millions to strangers while your own son loses everything? Yes. That's cruel. No, cruel is what you did to me. Cruel is watching your wife assault your father and saying nothing. This is just math. You subtract kindness. You subtract loyalty. You subtract basic human decency. What's left? Nothing. You're left with nothing. David's face crumpled. For a moment, I saw the child he'd been, the little boy who used to follow me around the workshop, who asked a million questions, who looked at me like I hung the moon. That boy was gone. I can't help you, I said. Even if I wanted to, you'd just waste it. You'd find another Jessica, another bad investment, another way to throw it away, because you never learned the value of working for something. Mom and I gave you everything, and you learned nothing. So that's it? You're just done with me? I've been done with you since the wedding. This conversation is just making it official. He stood up, wiped his eyes. I hope you're happy. I hope this revenge was worth it. It's not about being happy. It's about being fair. You took everything from me, my dignity, my son, my peace of mind. I took everything from you in return. Now we're even. We're not even. We'll never be even, because I can rebuild my life. But you'll die alone. No family, no one who cares, just money and bitterness. Maybe, but I'll die knowing I didn't let people walk all over me. That counts for something. David left. He didn't slam the door. He just walked out quietly, and I heard his footsteps fade down the stairs. I stood in my apartment for a long time, looking at Margaret's empty chair. Well, I said to her ghost, it's done. She didn't answer. She never would again. I poured myself a drink, sat down at my desk, and pulled out the photograph I'd been saving. The one from the wedding. Someone had emailed it to me weeks ago. Not the video, but a still image. The moment right after the slap. Me on the ground, Jessica standing over me, David looking away. I'd had it printed, framed, 8 by 10, professional quality. I hung it on the wall above my desk, next to Margaret's anniversary photo. 2 pictures, 2 versions of my life, before and after. I looked at them both and raised my glass. To consequences, I said. 6 months passed. Spring turned to summer. The city heated up, and I stayed inside, managing my investments, reading my books, existing in the quiet space Margaret had left behind. David called once. I didn't answer. Jessica sent an email asking for money for her lawyer. I deleted it. The crisis center sent me quarterly reports on how the fund was being used. 30 families helped so far. Rent paid, utilities covered, job training provided. Margaret would have been proud. I tried to feel proud too. Tried to feel something. Nothing. In late July, Richard called. You need to see this. See what? David wrote an article. Published it on Medium. You should read it. He sent me the link. I opened it on my tablet. The headline, My Father's Revenge, a cautionary tale about testing family. I almost closed it. Almost didn't read past the first paragraph. But something made me continue. David had written everything. The wedding, the slap, his silence, the systematic destruction of his life afterward, the house sale, the job loss, Jessica's firing, the bankruptcy. He'd connected the dots, realized it wasn't coincidence but strategy. He'd figured it out, and he'd written about it not with anger, but with something else: regret, understanding, acceptance. "My father tested us," he wrote, "and we failed. We failed because we'd become the kind of people who valued comfort over character, who saw our parents as resources instead of human beings, who forgot that love requires action, not just words." He described the slap in detail: the sound, the fall, his paralysis. "I tell myself I was in shock," he wrote, "but the truth is simpler and worse. I was a coward. I was afraid of my wife's anger, afraid of making a scene, afraid of choosing sides. So I chose nothing. And in choosing nothing, I chose against my father." The article went on for 3,000 words. He talked about the aftermath, about realizing too late what he'd lost. Not the money or the house, but the relationship, the connection. "I don't blame him," David wrote. "I'd have done the same thing. Maybe not as thoroughly, not as systematically. But I'd have wanted revenge too. When someone you love betrays you, when they watch you suffer and do nothing, revenge is logical. It's mathematical. It balances the equation." He ended with this: "If you're reading this and you have parents you love, call them, visit them. Don't wait until they're gone to realize what they meant. And if you're reading this and you've hurt your parents, apologize. Not because you'll be forgiven, you might not be, but because they deserve to hear it. Because actions have consequences, but so does inaction. I learned that too late. Don't make my mistake." The article had been shared 50,000 times. The comments were split, half praising David's honesty, half condemning him for what he'd done in the first place. I read it twice, then a third time. Then I called Richard. "Did you see this?" "Yes." "What do you think?" "I think it doesn't change anything." "Are you sure?" "He's sorry he got caught. Sorry he suffered consequences. He's not sorry for what he did. Not really. If Mom were still alive, if I hadn't had money, if there'd been no revenge, he'd still be the same person. He'd still have watched his wife hit me and said nothing." "Maybe. But Henry, people can change. Can they? Or do they just learn to hide better?" Richard was quiet for a moment. "That's up to you to decide. But I'll say this. That article took courage. He exposed himself, made himself vulnerable. That's not nothing. It's not enough either. What would be enough?" I didn't have an answer. I hung up and sat at my desk, staring at the 2 photographs on the wall. Margaret smiling, me on the ground, before and after. What came next? August 15th, Margaret's birthday. She would have been 65. I drove to the cemetery, brought flowers, yellow roses, her favorite. The headstone was simple: Margaret Ann Sullivan, beloved wife, 1960-2024. No mention of mother. David hadn't wanted it, said it felt too final. I'd added it anyway. "Happy birthday," I told the stone. "I got you roses. And I did something you'd hate, something you'd tell me I'd regret." I sat on the grass, not caring that it was damp, that my pants would stain. "I destroyed him, Margaret. Our son. I took everything from him. And you know what? It didn't fix anything. I thought it would. I thought if I could make him feel what I felt, if I could balance the scales, I'd feel better. But I don't. I just feel empty." A breeze rustled the trees. Somewhere nearby, a bird sang. He wrote about it, published an article. Everyone knows now. What he did, what I did. And people are taking sides. Some say I was justified. Some say I went too far. Nobody says we were both wrong, but we were. He was wrong to betray me. I was wrong to make revenge my entire purpose. I traced Margaret's name with my finger. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if it can be fixed. But I know you'd want me to try. You'd want me to be the bigger person, to forgive, to move on. The wind picked up. The roses I'd placed in the vase bent slightly. I'm not ready yet, but maybe someday. I stayed another hour, talking to her about nothing. The weather, the news, the book I was reading. Normal things, comfortable things. When I finally left, the sun was setting. I drove home slowly, thinking about David's article, about the 50,000 people who'd read it, about consequences and redemption, and whether second chances meant anything if the first chance had been so thoroughly wasted. My apartment felt wrong when I entered. Not unsafe, just wrong. Like I'd walked into someone else's life by mistake. I poured a drink but didn't finish it. Made dinner but didn't eat it. Sat in Margaret's chair and stared at nothing. The doorbell rang at 9. I almost didn't answer. Almost ignored it, stayed in my chair, let whoever it was go away. But I got up, walked to the door, looked through the peephole. David stood in the hallway, holding something. A box, small, wrapped in plain brown paper. I opened the door. I know you don't want to see me, he said before I could speak. I know I'm not welcome, but today's Mom's birthday, and I thought you might want this. He held out the box. I took it. It was light, almost weightless. What is it? Open it. I unwrapped the paper carefully. Inside was a small wooden box, handmade, with inlaid designs on the lid. Beautiful craftsmanship. Old. Where did you get this? I made it. In high school. Woodshop class, you remember? You helped me with the design. I did remember. Barely. David had been 15, struggling with the assignment. I'd spent an evening sketching ideas with him, showing him how to calculate angles, how to make the pieces fit. He'd been so proud when it was finished. Shown it to everyone. Put it on his shelf. I opened the box. Inside was a folded piece of paper. Read it, David said. I unfolded the paper. His handwriting, neat but shaky. Dad, I can't undo what I did. I can't go back to the wedding and defend you. I can't erase the slap or my silence or the years of taking you for granted. I can't fix what I broke. But I can tell you this. You were right. About everything. I was selfish. I was entitled. I treated you and Mom like ATMs instead of people. And when the moment came to choose between comfort and courage, I chose comfort. You taught me a lesson I'll never forget. You showed me what consequences look like. And while I hate what it cost me, while I resent losing everything, I understand it. I deserve it. This box was the first thing I ever built with your help. I'm giving it back to you now because I don't deserve to keep it. I didn't earn it. You gave me the knowledge, the time, the patience to make something beautiful. And I repaid you with neglect and cowardice. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect a relationship. I just want you to know that I understand now. And if I could go back, if I could have one more chance to do the right thing, I would. But I can't. So instead, I'm giving you this box and walking away. You win, Dad. You balance the equation. We're even now. David. I read it twice. Then I looked up at my son, standing in the doorway, looking older than his 43 years. You think this makes us even? No, nothing makes us even. But it's all I have left to give. I held the box, feeling its weight, remembering the evening we'd spent designing it. David had been so frustrated, couldn't get the angles right. I'd been patient, shown him again and again, until finally it clicked. He'd hugged me when it was done. 15 years old, too cool for affection usually, but in that moment, he'd forgotten to be cool. When had we lost that? When had he stopped being the kid who hugged me and become the man who watched me fall? I read your article, I said. I know. You told the whole world what I did. You told the whole world what I did first. The video did that. I just added context. Fair point. Why? I asked. Why write it? Because I needed to say it out loud, to admit what I'd become. And because, he hesitated, because I hoped maybe someone else would read it and not make my mistakes. Maybe some other son would call his father. Maybe some other family wouldn't fall apart. Redemption through public confession? I'm not looking for redemption. I'm looking for purpose. You took everything from me, Dad, and you were right to do it. But now, I have nothing. No family, no career, no future, just consequences. And I thought maybe I could turn those consequences into something useful. I looked at the box in my hands. Such careful work, such attention to detail. The David who'd made this had been capable of beautiful things. Was he still in there somewhere? Or had the years of entitlement and selfishness erased him completely? Do you remember, I said slowly, the day you finished this? You showed it to Mom, and she cried. Happy tears. She said she was proud of you. I remember. She'd want me to forgive you. But you don't. No, I don't. David nodded. He'd expected that answer. Okay, then I'll go. Keep the box. Throw it away. Whatever you want. I just needed you to have it. He turned to leave. David. He stopped. Your mother believed people could change. She believed in second chances. She believed in forgiveness. I know. I'm not her. I don't believe those things, but... I struggled to find the words. But I promised her I'd try. You don't owe her anything. You kept her comfortable. You were there every day. You did everything right. Except this. Except forgiveness. David turned around slowly. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I'm saying I'll try. For her sake. Not yours. Hope flickered across his face, tentative and fragile. What does that mean? Trying? It means you call me once a week, Sunday afternoons. We talk for 10 minutes, no more. You tell me about your week. I tell you about mine. We don't talk about the past. We don't apologize. We just exist in the same space for 10 minutes. That's all? That's all I can give right now. And if it doesn't get better, if we do this for months and you still hate me, then we stop, and we go back to being strangers. But at least we'll know we tried. David's eyes were wet. Okay, Sunday afternoons, 10 minutes, I can do that. Don't thank me. This isn't kindness. I know, I'll take it anyway. He left then, really left, without looking back. I closed the door and stood in my apartment, holding the wooden box, feeling something crack inside my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of possibility. The first call was awkward. David phoned at 2 p.m., exactly as we'd agreed. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Hello? Dad, it's David. I know. Silence. How was your week? He asked finally. Fine. Yours? Fine. More silence. I started a new job, David offered. Project management at a construction firm. It's entry level. The pay is bad, but it's honest work. Good. How's the weather been? David, we live in the same city. You know how the weather's been. Right. Sorry. I'm not good at this. Neither am I. We talked for exactly 10 minutes. Stilted, uncomfortable, artificial. When the timer on my phone went off, I said, That's time. Okay, same time next week? Yes. Bye, Dad. Goodbye. I hung up and sat in the silence. Margaret's chair across from me, empty as always. Week 1, I told her. It was terrible. The second week was slightly better. David talked about his new co-workers, about learning construction software, about living in his small apartment. I talked about a book I was reading, about the crisis center's latest report, about nothing important. By the 4th week, we could almost have a conversation. I saw Jessica, David said. At a coffee shop. She was with someone. New boyfriend, I guess. Rich looking. How did that feel? Like watching someone I used to know. I don't miss her. Isn't that strange? I thought I loved her. You loved who you wanted her to be, not who she was. Is that what happened with us? You loved who you wanted me to be? I thought about that. No, I loved who you were when you were young, before you forgot what mattered. Can I be that person again? I don't know. Can you? We talked for 13 minutes that week. I didn't cut him off. The anniversary came and went, marked only by another visit to the cemetery, more yellow roses, more one-sided conversations with a headstone. But something had shifted. The apartment didn't feel as empty. The silence didn't press as heavily. The Sunday calls had continued. 32 weeks of 10-minute conversations that gradually stretched to 15, then 20, then however long they needed to be. We talked about small things mostly. Work, books, the news. We didn't talk about the wedding. We didn't talk about revenge. We didn't apologize or seek absolution. We just existed together, 10 minutes at a time, building something fragile and new from the wreckage of what we'd destroyed. In March, David asked if he could visit. I said no. In April, he asked again. I said maybe. In May, I said yes. He came on a Saturday afternoon, bringing nothing but himself. No gifts, no grand gestures. Just my son, standing in my doorway, looking nervous. Come in, I said. He stepped inside and looked around. It's exactly the same. I thought you'd have changed things. Why would I? I don't know. Fresh start. New beginning. I don't want a new beginning. I want to honor what was. We sat in the living room. I made coffee. We drank it in silence. I got a promotion, David said finally. Assistant project manager. More money, more responsibility. Good. And I've been seeing a therapist, talking about everything. About Mom, about you, about who I became. And she says I need to accept that some things can't be fixed, that I can't undo the past, but I can choose differently going forward. Smart woman. She also says I should tell you something. He set down his coffee cup. That I love you. That I never stopped loving you, even when I was a terrible son. That revenge doesn't erase love. I looked at him. Really looked. Saw the gray in his hair that hadn't been there a year ago. Saw the lines around his eyes, the weight he'd gained back, the slow reconstruction of a human being. I don't know if I love you anymore, I said. I know I did once, and I know I'm trying to again. But love requires trust, and trust requires time. How much time? I don't know. Maybe years, maybe never. But you're trying. I'm trying. David nodded. That's more than I deserve. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This might not work. We might get to the end and realize we're too broken to fix. But we might not. But we might not, I agreed. He stayed for 2 hours. We talked about Margaret, about memories from when he was young, about the person he'd been before entitlement corrupted him. It hurt. Every word hurt. But it was the kind of pain that comes from healing, not from breaking. When he left, he hugged me. I didn't hug back, but I didn't pull away either. Next week? He asked. Next week. I watched him walk down the stairs, watched him disappear around the corner. Then I went back inside and sat in Margaret's chair. He's trying, I told her picture. I'm trying. It's not forgiveness. Not yet. But it's something. The photograph didn't respond, but I liked to think she'd be pleased. 2 years after the wedding, I took down the photograph. Not Margaret's. That stayed. But the other one. The picture of me on the ground, Jessica standing over me, David looking away. I'd hung it as a reminder, a testament to betrayal, to consequences, to the moment everything changed. But I didn't need it anymore. I knew what had happened. I knew what I'd done in response. And I knew that keeping it on my wall wasn't about remembering. It was about nursing a wound that needed to heal. So I took it down, put it in a drawer, and hung a new picture in its place. David and me, from 3 weeks ago. We'd gone to the cabin in Vermont, the one Margaret and I had visited for our 40th anniversary. Spent a weekend fishing, talking, existing together without the weight of the past crushing us. Someone at the lake, a tourist with a camera, had offered to take our picture. We'd stood together, my hand on David's shoulder, and for just a moment, we'd looked like a father and son instead of two people bound by obligation and guilt. The picture wasn't perfect. We weren't smiling, but we were present. Both of us, fully there, trying. I hung it next to Margaret's anniversary photo. Before, during, and after. A complete story. David called that Sunday at his usual time. "I got an offer," he said. "Senior project manager at a firm in Seattle. Significant pay increase, better opportunities." My chest tightened. "Seattle's far." "I know. Would you take it?" "I don't know. It's a great opportunity, but it would mean leaving, and we've only just started to rebuild," I finished. "Yeah, rebuild." I looked at the 3 photographs on my wall, Margaret smiling, David and I at the lake, the progression of a life lived, broken, and slowly, carefully pieced back together. "Take the job," I said. "Dad, take the job, David. You've worked hard. You've earned this. And Seattle's not that far. We have phones. We have planes. But the Sunday calls will continue. Same time, different time zone. We'll make it work." Silence on the other end. Then, "You mean that?" "I do. You've spent 2 years rebuilding your life. Don't put it on hold because of me." "You're my father. You're not on hold. You're important." The words hit me harder than I expected. "Then be successful. Be the person your mother always believed you could be. That's what's important." "What if I fail again? What if I mess up?" "Then you fail, and you get back up. That's life. But you don't avoid opportunities because you're afraid. That's just another form of cowardice." Okay, I'll take it. I'll call them tomorrow." We talked for another 30 minutes. About logistics, about what he'd miss, about plans for me to visit once he got settled. When we hung up, I sat at my desk and looked at the wooden box he'd given me 2 years ago. It sat there now, holding pens and paper clips and the small detritus of daily life. Not a shrine, not a monument, just a useful object made with care. Maybe that's what family was. Not perfect, not unblemished, but useful, functional, built with care and rebuilt when necessary. I opened my laptop and pulled up my bank accounts. $8 million, mostly untouched except for the donation to the crisis center and normal living expenses. I created a new account, transferred $500,000 into it, named it David's Emergency Fund. Not to give him, not yet, maybe never, but to have available if he needed it, if he got sick, if disaster struck, if life knocked him down through no fault of his own. I wouldn't tell him about it, wouldn't hang it over his head or use it as leverage. It would just exist, a safety net he didn't know he had. Because that's what fathers did, even angry ones, even broken ones, even ones who'd spent 2 years destroying their sons before slowly, painfully, deciding to rebuild. Margaret's voice in my head, "About damn time, Henry." I smiled. "Yeah, I know.